Joining me now for our political panel is Graham Morris, political strategist and former Liberal advisor, and Bruce Hawker, former Labor advisor and political strategist. So I'll ask the strategists about this announcement by Scott Morrison of missiles going to Ukraine, Bruce Hawker, and of course from our Labor guests this afternoon, they're in furious agreement. Once again, you'll be surprised to know, Bruce Hawker. So talk us through this, your view of it.
Well, I'm not surprised at all that they would be sending arms to Ukraine, and other countries are doing the same thing. Look, the Australian government, if they want to really elevate this as a political issue, have to try to create a scenario which is as close as possible to troops on the ground. In the past, Australians have backed incumbent governments when they've seen their troops entering into theatres of war. 1966, Vietnam was a very good example of that. Harold Holt having a landslide win in the aftermath of the Vietnam entry by Australia. 2001, when we saw the 9/11 and Tampa, big security-based election campaigns. Problem here for the government is that we don't actually have troops on the ground. It's a world away, and I suspect that most people are saying at the moment, look, the government's doing the right thing. They should be taking all those steps to make it harder for the Russians and easier for the poor Ukrainians. But I'm not sure that it's going to be the big vote shifter that Scott Morrison wants it to be.
All right, well, that might be a good time to bring up this news poll now, if we can do that, where it showed, well, apart from the fact that the news poll yesterday in The Australian showed it was still 55-45 and a 35 coalition primary vote, despite 2 weeks of saying Labor was soft on national security. On the Russian aggression, you've got Scott Morrison there ahead 30-24, ahead of Albanese on who best to handle it, and a lot of people saying about the same. And on China, similar numbers, which just goes to that old national security strategy of oppositions of not having a cigarette paper in between. And Anthony Albanese is trying to make sure of that. We certainly had Tanya Plibersek and Christina Keneally echoing those thoughts earlier. Graham Morris, a lot of effort by, I'm talking purely politics now because we know, it's also about doing the right thing. But a lot of effort going here from Scott Morrison, international security, thinking it seems to me that he can do a bit of a John Howard Tampa type strategy. And it hasn't had any lift-off so far, has it?
No, not yet, but sometimes there's a bit of a lag. But you can tell by this morning's poll in The Australian that there is just, it's what you would intuitively think, that there's just a slight gain for the government once you get to this foreign affairs and national security stuff. Not much at the moment because Mr Albanese is simply saying, me too. But it is one of those sort of things that's a plus for the coalition and certainly a plus for the older age group, which is a strong part of the Liberal Party and the coalition's vote. So strengthening that is important. What is interesting, I think, this time, Andrew, is the conjunction of the two events. All of a sudden, we're getting young people saying, what was the Cold War? And the other one, if these aren't the worst floods in history, what were the floods in the olden days? How bad were they? And it's just both of them at the moment are spiking a bit of interest in the young people. But on the defence one, you're right. I think there's a slight plus for the government, not enough to win the election at this stage. And that's why I think Josh Frydenberg's budget has to give the government a couple of points so that they go in, say, a point or two behind, but not 4 points behind.
And then you're a point or two behind. I might ask you, Graham, first. You're really, well, apart from a strong campaign, you're really relying on Albanese to stuff up to fall over the line, aren't you, if you're in that sort of scenario, if you're at 48 at the start of the campaign?
That's right. If you went in 4 points behind, you're relying on Mr Albanese to completely fall over. But there have been 2 or 3 elections won during the campaign. Certainly the Hayden one in 1980 was. The Latham one, I think Mr Latham helped in the last week with the size there. There's been a couple that have been won during the election campaign, but not starting 4 or 5 points behind. If you can start 1 or 2 behind, I think we know that Scott Morrison will campaign well. But I don't think, we're not in the ball game anymore of the Labor making the big blunders they did last time. But then again, you are a bit vulnerable to, well, why would I vote for you if I sort of don't know what you want?